All right, y'all, we're going to get this started. Noting the hour in the presence of quorum, I call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting online may use ActonTV's YouTube channel found at the top of the agenda. This meeting is also being recorded and will be posted on ActonTV's website at actontv.org. I don't actually have much of a welcome, except to say thank you to the music department and all of the kids who performed at the all-school band last night. It was extraordinary. And I think that the orchestra is playing tonight, and so I wish those kids luck. But all of the leaders of the music department, I had a great time, my boys had a great time, and I was just so very impressed, especially with the jazz band. It's my favorite always, and they were phenomenal. So I'm just gonna put that into the minutes, that our students, our musical students are amazing. All of our students are amazing, but I was particularly impressed last night. Next, I want to recognize that there are 6 Acton candidates for school committee. Are any of them here? Do they want to wave at the camera? Do you want to come to the mic and say hi, say your name, put that on the record too? You do not have to. I see there's at least 2 of y'all here.
It's on. Hello, Jason Fitzgerald. I've been in Acton for 20-something years. I have four kids in the district, and I'm running for school committee.
Thank you, Jason.
Hello, my name is Leela Ramachandran, 9 Arbor Road. I am running for school committee. I graduated from AB and I went here K-12. And then I went to college and I came back and I'm excited to run. So thanks, Kyra.
You're welcome. Thanks to Beth, because she's the one who put it on the agenda. If there are any other school committee members who would like to, school committee candidates who would like to come and say hi in the next couple of meetings, please do so. March 28th is the last date for Boxborough residents to file nomination papers for our 2 Boxborough seats. Their election is on May 16th. Next, we welcome our student representatives. Our Rohan, Rohan is here and Molly is here. Anybody else here? Very good. Hi, Molly.
That would be helpful. Hi, look how bright it is outside. It's so nice. Anyways, I'm Molly. Not much has happened in the past month at school, to be fair. It's been a boring March and February. I mean, we had February break, but it was, March is March. It's a very slow month. But we have MCAS coming up for 10th graders, which I'm doing, so it's very fun. And also, I just wanted to talk about a club that I'm in because we're hosting a community auction event. It's the Interact Club. We work at the Rotary in Acton to raise money with pair with local businesses and raise money for charities. So this event is raising money for Boston Children's Hospital. So we have lots of businesses around Acton. I think our most expensive donation was a mug something club at Rapscallion, and it's worth $100 or something, which is amazing. So that was a big, I think we're just gonna have that one alone. We're also putting lots of our businesses together and making baskets, and I think it's just going to be very fun. So that is on April 1st at 7:30 in the ABRHS cafeteria if anybody wants to come.
Hey everyone, so today I wanted to talk about the budget cuts that are going to go into effect and some of the teachers that we're going to have to let go. And so in light of all of that, I recognize that you guys have done your best to keep as much of the staff as possible, and budget cuts are necessary, and they're going to happen. And so I wanted to talk about some of my personal experiences with those teachers because they truly are incredible people. So a couple years ago, we lost my grandfather, and I never truly, kind of understood what that meant, even though I was pretty old. I never was able to grieve over that. And so on one of his anniversaries of his death, I was really just not able to function in school. Like, I was there and it was on my mind, but there was all these like built up emotions that I couldn't process. And that's when one of my teachers asked me how I was feeling and why I look so different from the way I usually look and act. And that led to her carving out an hour of her day to talk about both her own experiences, to give me a poem to read, and to just listen to what I had to say. And it was that conversation that finally allowed me to kind of process and cry about the whole thing. And so I tell this story because, not to bum everyone out, because that class was awesome. Like, we had such an amazing community. It was one of the first classes where I've truly felt like I've been able to ask and answer questions that are meaningful, not just how to do integrals and stuff, which I still don't know where that applies. And so every teacher is capable of this exact story, and every teacher does the story. It's not just the one experience. I've seen teachers beg students to come to extra help, to take time out of their days to help me catch up with work. I've seen teachers spend extra time with students that are falling behind. And so when we when we let go of teachers, I just want to re-emphasize how important their work is and how important all the teachers in our school are, because I don't think that gets talked about enough. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now open up the mic for public participation. Per school committee policy BEDH, members of the public are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes regarding items that are not on the agenda. For items that are on the agenda, the public is asked to please wait for that item. Speakers must be recognized by the chair before speaking. The committee does not typically respond to comments during public participation. Well then, Mr. Light, do you have an update for us?
All right, I actually have quite an update. So Molly, thank you for not taking up all the stuff. There are actually a number of things that I'm pleased to be able to give you an update on tonight. One, I am putting information in the update that we'll send home tomorrow, and I know I already shared this with you, but around the high school course level presentation, we want to make sure all of our families across the district have access to the same information. So in that, we've included the information presented last Tuesday, March 7th, as well as the survey where we're trying to collect feedback from families about the presentation we did. It includes a recording of the community presentation at the high school. It includes slides from that presentation, which also have several links to a robust set of data and research on the topic for people to explore. It includes the actual survey link, and then the original copy of the invitation that we had sent out. We do have a follow-up presentation coming on Tuesday, March 21st at 6:30 p.m. That is a Zoom webinar. We did one in person for people who wanted an in-person experience, and we're doing one on Zoom for people who need something that may be a bit more accessible in that environment. Want to also give you an update on the leadership coalition we developed to combat hate and bias in our schools. So that group met for the first time on February 27th to begin its work. We would have met a second time, however, we were snowed out on the only snow day of the year. The coalition is made up of a diverse group of stakeholders in our schools and community committed to creating an inclusive environment in the district. Purpose of the group is to study and recommend implementation of strategies that can significantly reduce hate and bias incidents in our schools. We hope to communicate additional opportunities for more community members to engage with the group and help lead that important work. Look for additional communication from the group later this spring. Along that same line, I'm pleased to be able to announce that our school district was just awarded this week a $50,000 hate crimes prevention grant by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I want to thank Jen Faber and Andrew Shen for leading the application process to that. That grant's going to enable us to have funding to implement programs designed to prevent hate crimes and bias incidents. So we're very thankful to DESE for that support and look forward to seeing the impact of that work. I had an opportunity last week. I don't know if all of you know what the chair ceremony is, but it's one of the really unique things to Acton-Boxborough, where we have an opportunity to recognize all of the educators in the district who reached their 20th year of service. So we had 13 faculty and staff from across the district who were represented there. We run that in cooperation with the Acton-Boxborough Education Association, so I want to thank the ABEA, as well as all of the staff members who participated in that ceremony. It's really nice to be able to do something to recognize educators mid-career and not just sometimes at retirement. I also had an opportunity last week to attend some of the High School World Cultures Week, and that is a celebration where students get passports to be able to attend a variety of activities over the course of the week. So there are everything from games, presentations, student talks about their own backgrounds and cultures, and different food that kids can sample as well. So I just want to thank the World Languages Department for sponsoring that and all the students who work to make that happen. And then finally, last week, during Literacy Week over at Blanchard, I had an opportunity to be the mystery reader in Miss Lavolsi's second grade classroom at Blanchard. So that was a fantastic experience. Students were amazing, as they always are, and engaging. I was even complimented on my fluency at one point. So I was very pleased to be able to go to that classroom. I also want to put out a plea for help for Project Graduation. So for over 30 years, Project Graduation has been hosting Grad Night, a safe, substance-free, all-night lock-in party for the high school senior class as they graduate. Concurrently, the future of Grad Night, not concurrently, the future of Grad Night is uncertain because they do not have a pipeline of parent volunteers coming up through the system. It's really important to get parents of younger students involved in supporting this event because our seniors' parents are typically tied up around commencement, and they can't be the ones to be sponsoring and chaperoning and doing all those other things. So we'll be sending out a plea for help for that on behalf of Project Graduation. We're hopeful we can get members of the community involved. I also want to call your attention to an extremely important event for us, which is the Out of Darkness Walk for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So we're hosting an event on Saturday, April 1st. That is our annual Out of Darkness Walk in conjunction with the Acton-Boxborough United Way and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We'll be sending out information for links to the website where people can either register teams, donate, or think about participating individually. That is Saturday, April 1st. We also have a series of upcoming Cartwheel Care webinars. So far, through the partnership we have with Cartwheel Care, we've hosted 2 family webinars on issues surrounding mental health and students. We have 3 more coming up. The next one is Wednesday, April 5th at 7:00 p.m., and that is going to be on the topic of ADHD and executive functioning. And then on May 3rd, we have Fostering Resilience in Our Kids and Ourselves, and on May 31st, Recognizing and Managing Anxiety. So 3 great information opportunities for families to learn more about supporting kids. And then we have our last community coffee, our third to last community coffee coming up on March 22nd at 7:00 p.m., and that is a virtual community coffee. So that is it for me today. Lots going on.
Yes.
If I could just say that if anyone who hasn't been to the Out of the Darkness Walk, or even if you have, you know what an amazing event it is, and a really, really important day. So please consider putting it on your calendar, or at the very least, donate a few dollars and join a virtual team. It means a lot to people. Thanks.
Would you like to introduce our awesome student presenter?
There was nothing more than what I'd like to do. So Advay, come on up. I had an opportunity to go over to the high school probably 2 weeks ago now, and I got to hear Advay present to his peers and to some of the staff at the high school on a project that he had done. He recently was one of the finalists in the Regeneron Science Foundation Prize, and he was one of 300 students recognized across the country for that from, I think it was over 2,000 students who had applied from public and international high schools. So incredibly proud of Advay. What struck me in Advay's presentation wasn't just the fact that I couldn't understand anything he was talking about mathematically, but how well he was able to communicate that at a level where I still felt like I understood it. And I could follow along enough to be able to really be engaged, understand what he was talking about at a very preliminary level. I did have to ask my son what some of the terms meant, which luckily he could fill me in. But I really thought, we don't get enough students coming to school committee meetings, and I thought it would be great to be able to have Advay talk about the presentation that he did at the high school, a little bit of the work he did for that prize, and just be able to answer any questions from a school committee standpoint. So, Advay, congratulations. Congratulations to your family, who I know is here as well, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Light, for having me, and to the rest of the school committee, for taking the time to listen to this presentation. So, I guess to get things started, the name of my research paper that I submitted is The Geometry and Limits of Young Partition Flow Polytopes. And in the presentation today, I guess I wanted to take you a little bit through the project at a high level, what I did in the project, why it's important, and I guess give some basic understanding of, why I found it so special as well, this research. So to begin, the first question I'd like to ask are, what are flow polytopes? Because that in itself is like the basis of my research. And at a high level, flow polytopes are special shapes that exist in high dimensions. This could be 2D shapes, a 3D shape, 9 dimensions, 29 dimensions. It could be anything, really. And to give a couple examples of flow polytopes that exist, you can take a look at the blue structures. And so those are a couple examples of flow polytopes in 3 dimensions. And as you kind of increase the number of dimensions, they certainly get much more wonky. And I guess you can't really visualize them either, which is why I'm sticking with 3D for now. So I guess given right now the structure, you're probably wondering that why are these special shapes so important? Like, why do we study flow polytopes? What significance do they have? And before I get to that, I'd like to first take a quick tangent that right now, artificial intelligence is really, really important in today's lives, and it's making breakthroughs faster than ever. But the way that many artificial intelligence algorithms work is in order to stay very accurate while also having very high efficiency, they need to make very smart approximations to save time. And the way that these approximations work is through something called combinatorial optimization. And basically the idea is that if we're better able to understand combinatorial optimization and solve these optimization problems better, then we can make the artificial intelligence algorithms better as well to make them more accurate and more efficient. And this is where flow polytopes come in, that when we're modeling combinatorial optimization geometrically in space, these combinatorial optimization problems can be modeled by flow polytopes. And what that means is that if we can better understand flow polytopes, then we can better solve combinatorial optimization methods, which means we can then better the AI algorithms that have the opportunity to make tangible impacts on the world. So now getting to the actual problem is that right now for flow polytopes, we don't know very much about that. In that you see this like web on the right. I like to say that this web represents math, that every single blue box is like a different category of math, a different section. And all the different lines connecting the different sections kind of show how interconnected math is. That there are all these different fields, but they're all connected in some way or the other, which means that if we're able to make progress in one field of math, we make progress in every field of math via these connections. However, flow polytopes right now are not connected. They kind of exist outside, and these same connections don't exist the way they do with the rest of math. So for my research problem, I would basically try to figure out how do we connect flow polytopes to other fields of math? That once we form these connections in these webs, that basically means that we can then better understand flow polytopes because any progress that's made in other fields can then be transferred directly over to flow polytopes, which means we'll understand them better as well. So to kind of work on this and build these bridges between flow polytopes, I focused on their volumes. And specifically, in 1999, 3 mathematicians named Chan, Robbins, and Yuan published a conjecture. And basically they showed that the volume of flow polytopes can be represented in terms of a sequence of numbers called the Catalan numbers. And what's important to know about the Catalan numbers is that they appear all over math, and they kind of serve as these different bridges between different fields of math. So the fact that the Catalan numbers are also appearing with flow polytopes kind of means that these bridges do exist. We just have to kind of unearth why these bridges are there, what they mean, and see exactly what exactly is happening and what the connections are. So for my project, I tried focusing on the Catalan numbers, showing why they appeared and using these connections to make the bridge, which you can kind of see over here, that using the Catalan numbers, we create bridges to other fields of math, which then helps kind of integrate flow polytopes into math as a whole. So to do so, I kind of worked on splitting a flow polytope into its different parts. You can kind of think about this as, let's say I had to analyze this table over here. Rather than analyzing the entire table, I might break it down into its different sections. Like I start off with this small chunk here, then another small chunk, then another small chunk. Maybe like breaking down into its atoms even. So I did a similar decomposition of a flow polytope, but they're called simplices. And the simplest example is a triangle. That the triangle is the building block of all two-dimensional shapes. And as you kind of extend further into more dimensions, you get these things called simplices, or simplex for the singular case. And you can see some examples over here of simplices. So for 2 dimensions, it's just a triangle. 3 dimensions is a pyramid, and it continues on for higher dimensions. And for my project, I focused on breaking down the flow polytope into its simplices, that if I could understand this simplex structure, this like, you can kind of think about like the atomic structure of the flow polytope, then you can kind of build up from there, building up using the building blocks, and figuring out from there what exactly is the volume and where do the Catalan numbers come into play. So with this idea in mind, I worked over several weeks, if not months, understanding the simplex structure and kind of formalizing it into an exact algorithm. And then I coded the algorithm using Java. And basically this algorithm allowed me to give an exact simplex decomposition for every single flow polytope. And I then used that decomposition to understand why the Catalan numbers are appearing. And at the end, this led to my final result, that using my building block analysis and the code, I shed light on why the Catalan numbers appear, which now in the future means that we have some more understanding of how the flow polytopes are related to many other fields of math. So from here, the next step is to then kind of see what exactly these bridges are and what we can now understand more about flow polytopes that can then be used to solve combinatorial optimization problems better, to then make these bigger impacts on artificial intelligence so that we can help make AI better and potentially help make real-world impacts. So I guess that was my project, and thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So I have to tell you that as a writer, I'm big mad at AI right now because ChatGPT is messing up the literary world. But as a speculative fiction writer, I am utterly excited about all of the things that you just told us. So what I would love to know, outside of putting literary writers and artists and other people out of business, what do you hope your bridge that you're trying to build will do for AI? And what are you hoping AI will gain from your research?
Yeah, so I guess rather than having a very specific goal for AI, I think this has the potential to kind of just generally help AI algorithms as a whole, that regardless of the application of artificial intelligence, it all kind of boils down to the same thing, that how can we make this smart approximation and make it efficiently? So I guess by helping to connect flow polytopes and better understanding them, I'd hope to just help mathematicians and computer scientists better solve combinatorial optimization problems in general, so that any artificial intelligence algorithm, regardless of the application, whether it be in, say, healthcare or in the tech sphere, wherever, it has the opportunity to be enhanced, so you can really make the impacts wherever in any field that you'd like.
Mine's actually a little bit more of a comment. I think that this is actually really awesome, and one thing that I am seeing, which I feel like might have crossed your mind as well, just from like a 30,000 foot level, is, you know, you're really talking about integrating these polytopes with all different levels of math. You know, and I think that this could actually be really helpful for just education. You know, just think about the kindergartners straight on through, you know, involving the polytopes at a very young age, and then, you know, moving that forward. I just think that it's a really, really great idea.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. It's definitely really cool that you can kind of just integrate different things into math. And I guess just the fact that it's all a web of its own, that everything is connected, and just finding these connections as well is really cool.
Yeah, and then they don't even realize that they're learning it until they're adults and they have to use that, and they're like, oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, Advay, and I remember this from your talk at the high school, but can you talk about, you know, if you're doing artificial intelligence and you're programming algorithms, reliability of a solution is incredibly important. Can you talk about how you found that your solution was reliable enough to be able to move this forward?
Yeah. So at first, I did a lot of test cases that when I created my code, I knew the simplex structure of a lot of flow polytopes from past papers and past results that had been proven. And so kind of using these past results, I created over 1,000 test cases, and I checked my code against every single test case, and it was correct in all 1,000 plus cases. So I figured that with high likelihood, the code actually is correct. And from there, I worked towards formally proving it. And the majority of my paper actually is a formal proof that the algorithm and the methodology that it uses is correct, and it provides the simplex structure as I claim it should.
My second question is, could you just talk a little bit of a high-level overview of what the Regeneron process was, how you got involved with it, what it looked like for you, and, you know, why it was a good opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. So I got involved with this research project when I met my mentor Zhou at a math camp, and in that she was teaching a class that was kind of similar to this project, and I just found it really interesting. So I asked her if I could learn more and maybe work on a research project with her. And she agreed, and she kind of suggested this idea. I found it interesting, and we began researching from there. But I think from there, I had like a great learning curve in that this entire research project that I just described, it took me about 1.5 years from start to finish. And I think it taught me a lot, for example, about like the importance of persistence, that when I was developing my code and just the simplex structure algorithm in general, there were lots of ups and downs, failures, having to get back and just keep on working, even though you know that maybe your next attempt or attempt after that might not work, but kind of knowing that you're making progress step by step by step, and at the end you'll eventually get there. So I think that taught me a lot, and that was a big part of my Regeneron application as well. Application itself, I focused a lot, I guess, on the importance of the project, which I felt was also really good, that being able to do this reflection, both in the Regeneron application and also actually while making the slideshow, I felt that it kind of gave me a deeper understanding of the project itself, being able to better understand exactly what I did, and kind of proving to myself yet again that I am proud of my work and it has the opportunity to have a significant impact. And it's definitely something I'd like to continue as well into the future, so I myself can also continue working on this, and maybe I can be the one that solves this issue.
So you're amazing, and that's now on the public record, and that's wonderful. Is there anybody for whom you would like to just give a shout out to, who supported you along the way?
Project, like she kind of, when I started this project, I had no idea what a flow polytope was. I had no idea about these connections, about like the web of math as she described it to me as well. So she kind of helped me from the ground up, helping me through all of my struggles and problems. So I'm really thankful for her. I definitely would not be anywhere close to where I am right now without her help. I'd also like to thank my family, my mom, dad, and sister sitting right there, that they also helped me a lot, that there'd be times I know in the summer where I'd be pretty like bummed out because the entire day I'd spent trying and failing, and I kind of just felt like I wasn't making progress. And I felt that throughout this entire time, I could go to them and just, even if they didn't understand what I was saying, I could just talk to them about what was happening, and they'd, I guess, help me out and make me feel better and give me the motivation to continue working the next day and the day after that, until eventually I started feeling like I was making good progress.
Thank you so much, Advay. That was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. That was extraordinary. Our students are extraordinary. That was wonderful. All right, now we have to do business. Like ongoing business. Here we go. Oh, yeah, the ongoing business is your business. Yes, it is. All right, so we're going to get our recommendation to approve the superintendent's FY24 final budget. This is the third vote, yes, on this budget. And then we will be ready for town meeting, one hopes. Is Dave joining you for this?
Dave, do you want to join me up here, or do you want to stay there? It's your choice. That's why we're giving you those. All right, so thank you, Kyra. I think actually Rohan said it best. This is obviously a challenging budget process, and I know you're all aware of that. But just to understand a student perspective on what teachers mean to kids is always important to keep in mind, and I couldn't say it any better than what you said, so thank you. This is the last presentation we do in the budget process. It says 6, but there was also a pre-presentation, so it's technically number 7. This is our final budget vote for tonight. We have to take a budget vote 45 days before the earliest town meeting. So the deadline for that is tomorrow, so tonight's the night that we have to make sure we finish the budget process. And just as a reminder, town meetings in Acton begin on May 1st and in Boxborough, May 8th. The vote tonight is 2/3 of weighted votes of the full school committee, right? So even if members are absent, there's still 11 total people. So it's 2/3 of the weighted votes of the school committee is what we need to pass the budget. I want to give you a couple updates since the last meeting. Since our last meeting, the governor released the preliminary numbers, and we had an opportunity to dig into those in terms of state budget, and we want to talk a little bit about that. But we also had finished negotiations with the teachers union, ABEA, and so after negotiations concluded and contract was ratified, we went back and we updated all of the salary information in the budget to reflect that. And basically what happened is overall there was about $100,000 surplus in the budget at that point, because we, obviously once you finish updating everyone's salary information, it's accurate, then you have your final calculations. Based on all of our previous conversations, the most challenging position at the junior high school was still the health and physical education teacher, and we know we have some curriculum changes that need to be made at that level. And so we had restored the health and physical education position at the junior high, and then there was some residual money left that we put into the substitute budget. Right now, the substitute budget for this year is trending about $100,000 to the deficit on the year, and it's one of the glaring areas of critical need in the district right now. On any given day, we have multiple classes that do not have substitutes to cover them. That usually ends up being the high school, and what happens is kids' classes are getting canceled, and they end up with multiple free periods every day, and that's really not the learning environment that we want to have. We just made some updates to our substitute rate of pay in order to be able to attract enough substitutes to fill that out. It's having some positive impacts, but we know that will have a budgetary impact as well. So we thought that was a good use of a small amount of surplus there, was to carry that in the sub-budget so that we didn't run into another deficit there next year. The other area of an update was in Chapter 78, and we brought this actually to Budget Subcommittee this past Monday to get some additional guidance around a recommendation we made. And since we started the budget process, we've actually continued to enroll multilingual learners in the district at a very high rate, and we are actually now projecting that we will need a third multilingual teacher next year, or English language teacher. We were able to fund 2 initially in the budget process. Those were targeted to the elementary schools just to meet minimum number of required service minutes over the course of a week. That left still a challenge at the high school, but that challenge has grown at the high school, where we now believe we need to add a third English language educator specific to the high school. So our recommendation is to add that additional money into the English language educator at the high school, and then again use the balance of that into the substitute budget. as a way of holding that money and making sure it stays there. I'll back up a minute because I realize I didn't give a good explanation of why that money was there. When the governor released her preliminary budget proposal, which is considered generally a floor for budget process across the state, in it was a minimum aid increase of $30 per pupil. That was expected, and that's what was included. However, what was also included was that they, if you remember from the budget process last year, they had increased minimum aid from $30 per pupil to $60 per pupil. And at the time, they said that was a one-time increase, and finance directors should not count on that being carried forward into the FY24 budget. In the governor's budget, they decided to leave that $60 in as the base for FY23, and then built the additional $30 a student on top. So instead of getting an additional $150,000 in Chapter 78, that means next year we can now count on a total of $300,000 in Chapter 78 beyond what we would have been predicting last year. So that's a positive development. We felt it was prudent to, there are always opportunities to think about how you might want to spend money. The bottom line is we believe that we're going to need to add the English language educator, whether it's now or whether it's 3 weeks from now or whether it's over the summer. Our ability to attract and recruit teachers is going to diminish quickly if we don't post these positions now. So we also know that if we don't add it and get it in the base budget this year, then this amount of money to hire that English language educator that we have to then hire later this summer will actually become a liability on the FY25 budget. And we don't want to be creating liabilities for next year now while we're doing that. So this is a relatively conservative approach based on the needs that we're seeing in the district. And I believe, the use of the money in the substitute budget is prudent at this point to make sure that we don't run that line item in a deficit again next year. Dave, I don't know if you want to add anything on this? Okay. So our recommendation tonight, and I believe, and I'll let the budget subcommittee, I don't see Adam here yet, but the budget subcommittee also felt confident in recommending that forward, that this was the use of that additional Chapter 70 aid. So adding the third EL educator, which is a critical need due to continued enrollment changes, and placing the remaining balance of funds into a substitute budget would be our recommendation for this. That's the big decision tonight, and I recognize that's new information coming into this meeting, but it's just the timing of the state budget versus the other work we had to do leading to that. I want to just go through kind of proposed overview of what this means in terms of changes. And I put previous, which would be the preliminary budget that you voted, and then our final recommendation tonight. This current recommendation restores an additional junior high school health and physical education teacher and adds a third English language educator. So in terms of additions, where we were at 2 additions, we're now going to be at 3. And then in terms of reductions, it moves us from 17.4 to 16.4 FTE. So the net change in staffing from current fiscal year into next would be going down 13.4 overall positions. Again, I'm just making sure we're being really clear, not only with you, but with community who are watching. Our only additions in next year's budget are 3 English language educators across the district. 2 would be targeted to elementary school at this point, and 1 at the high school. And then this is a summary slide that I had previously presented, but I just wanted to show you the updates. The reductions through attrition actually came down on this one because the junior high school health and PE is actually replacing a teacher who's leaving at the end of the year anyway. So it didn't, save an additional job, but it was a necessary position. And then the junior high school reductions went from 3.6 to 2.6. So that's the major change here. And then just to recap the overall budget process, we are continuing to see increases in the volume and complexity of our student needs. That includes post-pandemic learning, both academic and social emotional. It looks at kind of the needs of our multilingual students coming into the district and our students with IEPs. The 2-year net impact of the budget challenges we've had is that this will be an overall reduction of 34 FTE over 2 years. Last year, we reduced 20.6. Most of those were non-certified staff at that point. This year, we didn't have more non-certified staff to really continue to reduce. And so we had to look at our certified staff, which are primarily administrators and educators in the district, and we had 13.4 reductions. So that's the 34 FTE that we looked at overall. We're still able to meet school committee recommended class sizes with that, which is good that we're able to do that. I will say that we're really at a point now where if we continue to see the reductions, it's going to just strain the system. And, you know, I do have some serious concerns that if we continue to do this, we're not going to be putting forth the quality of educational program that I think our, you know, students expect and need, and our families and community have come to expect out of the schools as well. So this is certainly something that we're going to have to be, you know, concerned about and thinking about for the following year as well. This is a chart that you've seen in previous budget years, but I just wanted to show you a little bit of the history of the budget development. You can see what last year's final budget appropriation was, what your preliminary vote was, and what the final FY24 numbers are. Even though the percent budget has increased from 2.77 to 2.91, it is assessment neutral. And that's essentially because the budget increased, but so did the revenue from outside sources. So state aid increased by 100,000, our budget increased, 150,000, the budget increased by the same amount. The assessments to the two towns stay exactly the same as we had projected last time. So with that, Dave and I are happy to answer questions, but we also wanted to just put the slide up. You have budget vote language on your table as well for tonight. But I think, you know, one thing, you know, we might suggest, the decision point is, you know, recommendation of Administration and Budget Subcommittee around the use of that additional Chapter 70 money, and then the final budget vote would be the two things.
Thank you, Peter, for the explanation. So I have a quick question. So can you correct me, double check? So my impression is that we had a high school English teacher cut, right? And now is you propose to increase one EL teacher. What is the difference between regular English teacher high school and the EL English teacher?
That's a great question. Deb, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah. So the English teacher that we cut from the budget was from the English department. And so based on class sizes and number of students and sections that we needed, the English language development educator is to teach students whose English is their second language, so who are coming who don't have English, and so will be taught the English language. And so it's a different teacher, a different license than we're looking for to support students.
So can you talk a little bit more about the need for this additional EL teacher? I'm actually worried that I guess what I want to know is this the start of building a team around this? Do we need more than the extra person who we're adding? Do we think that this is going to be enough? Do we think that there's going to be, are you projecting that we're going to need another one next year and another one the year after? And I think what I've heard is now there's going to be 2 for the elementary schools, 1 for the high school. If we need 2 for the elementary schools, that probably means that we're going to need 1 for the middle school eventually. Can you just share a little bit about your thinking around this? Because I think a future school committee is going to have to confront this significant change that's happening to this district.
Yeah, Deb, do you want to talk to that as well?
Sure. So I think each year it is something that we have to look at, especially as we're seeing students move into the district, to see where the need is. Sometimes it's at the elementary, sometimes it's at the junior high, sometimes it's at the high school. This is the second English language development educator that will be added to the high school. We already have 1, but the need of the students who've moved in and the students we see rising from 8th grade who are going to need, the amount of time, and to have 2 personnel at the high school to meet that need. The junior high right now, we feel like with the rising sixth graders, with the one English language development educator, that'll be sufficient. But as we shared earlier in one of the other presentations, at all the elementary schools, we're not meeting time that recommended by DESI. So those 2 additional ones will help us with that. But yes, in the future, we'll have to look very carefully to see where the need is and have additional educators support students.
I just wanted to say, being at the budget sub-meeting, I very much support this idea that the way that we're spending these funds for this 3rd EL teacher at the high school. I can't imagine coming into high school as a non-English speaker or limited English speaker and confronting the level of language-intensive curriculum and the idea of not having enough support for these students is really, I think it's a major concern. I think this is exactly where we should be putting our money.
I was just going to say, the presentation you had about EL students and staff was way back in November, I think. But we have 13 or 14 certified EL teachers in the district now. So we're adding 3. We've gone from roughly 250 students in the district receiving specialized instruction as English learners to 350 since August. And so we went from about 5% of our kids to 8% of our kids. We're now in the high incidence districts. I think some of this is due to COVID. Not as many families moved for a couple of years. And so some of it is catch up in that way. So we'll get closer to the recommended minutes from the Department of Ed. And yeah, we're seeing many kids in a short period of time who are newcomers, meaning they're coming into a school at any grade, pre-K through 12, without any English at all, or very, very limited. So that's, Deb explained it, but I just wanted to remind you of some of the percentages and numbers we're talking about.
And just one additional comment, I think maybe you said this, but I'll just elaborate on it. We are outpacing the state average in terms of the percentage of students coming to us who are in their first 2 years in the United States as well, at almost, I think, a 2-to-1 rate for the state. So that's a significant number for us that we're watching closely. We do graduate students out of English language services every year, but we also add students, obviously, at a faster rate than we're graduating kids out.
So I just want to make sure, are we expecting to see what we're seeing this year repeated next year?
My personal take is 1 year does not make a trend line, and I think we're going to need to watch this for the next couple of years to understand what the longer-term trend will look like.
Okay, so now, last year there was all sorts of... John, do you want to say something? Thank you, Amy. Mr. Peterson, what can we do for you?
Thank you. I did want to briefly comment, and this is about this demographics discussion that you're having, and this is really probably not so germane for tonight, but in the future. And like everything else, I think the answer is complicated by our proximity to COVID. But the question that I had, because I don't think I've ever seen this before, is has the average residence time of a student in the district changed over time? In other words, you know, there was a period of time where my sense was that there were many people that moved into the district in elementary school and actually stayed pretty much the whole way through. And obviously, in terms of the service delivery, that's one kind of need, which is different than somebody who was in district for 2 or 3 years and then's gone. So I would, you know, again, I think this isn't so much for tonight, but it would be interesting to look at that because, again, that would impact the design of service delivery.
So a very good point, Mr. Peterson. Thank you. Any other comments from the public before? I'm sorry, I should have looked up. Okay, very good. So what I was going to say is that there was all sorts of shenanigans last year around language and us getting it right, et cetera, et cetera. So Beth, do you want me to read this motion? Is there
felt
anybody who
confident,
would like
Kyra.
to read this motion verbatim? Please.
I move that the committee adopt the budget of the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District for the fiscal year July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024, as presented in the amount of $105,897,586, which is reduced by estimated receipts and available funds in the following amounts. Anticipated Chapter 70 aid in the amount of $15,792,511. Anticipated state transportation aid in the amount of $2,241,018. Anticipated state charter school aid in the amount of $150,000. Anticipated Medicaid reimbursement of $250,000. Anticipated investment earnings of $300,000. Estimated miscellaneous revenues of $25,000. And transfers from the following district reserves. Excess and deficiency fund in the amount of $1,375,000. Capital stabilization fund in the amount of $150,000. For a net amount to be assessed to member towns in accordance with the education reform law and the terms of the regional agreement and amendments thereto as follows. Acton, $71,669,758, consisting of a capital assessment of $5,766,655 and an operating assessment of $65,903,103, and Boxborough, $13,944,299, consisting of a capital assessment of $1,026,900 and an operating assessment of $12,917,399.
Seconded.
Okay, so that was Ginny, and Ben got his second. And so now, because it's a weighted vote, do I need to do a roll call? Yes. All righty, here we go. You ready? Starting with Andrew, let's go.
Yes.
Liz.
Yes.
Yepin. Yes. Ginny. Yes. Tessa. Yes. Myself, yes. Amy.
Yes.
Rebecca. Yes. Ben.
Yes.
That passed unanimously, and therefore the wait is good.
Wait is good.
We're all set? Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, gentlemen. We do love it when the wait is good. All right, here we go. So, next with ongoing business. Recommendation to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form for the Conant School. Mr. Verdolino. You thought you escaped. It's got your name on it.
Do you want me to jump in on the stage?
Oh, that's, okay. Ooh.
I think this is self-explanatory. You have a vote whose wording is prescribed by MSBA in order to get in what used to be called the pipeline. Don't know if they still call it that, but for a future project that would address shortcomings in the Conant School building. Peter has updated the application itself, and do they have that, Peter?
That is published online, yes.
And so this is unfortunately something that needs to be read exactly as prescribed by MSBA without deviation, and you have that in your materials.
And I'll just add a note that we probably have at least this one more year where, if not a couple of years, where this is still fairly a perfunctory vote. We are not anticipating right now that they're going to accept us into the pipeline because you can't have a project open and be approved for a second capital project through MSBA while that's happening. We did note in the updated application that, the Douglas Gates Hebner School is now substantially complete and students have moved in, but we do have, really through next August of construction for parking lots and ball fields, things like that. So, we're not anticipating this is going to go anywhere, but we want to keep our name in the MSBA pipeline. So we just updated some of the language. Updates are in red so that it was a little easier to see what might have changed year to year. And I would turn it over to you, but we do want to get this submitted by April 14th.
So before we do this, can you speak for the lay folk about what it is that we're voting on, why we are, what is the project, what are we doing here? So that way folks who are playing along at home know what's about to happen.
Sure. So, we're building one school right now, or completing one school, the Douglas Gates Hebner Elementary School. In order to build that, communities acknowledge that communities can't build a new school alone due to the cost or continue to renovate schools alone. So the state has a reimbursement program through the Mass School Building Authority where schools can get a portion of the construction costs that are eligible for reimbursement, reimbursed through the state fund. The money for that comes through, I believe, 1% or 1 penny on the sales tax for every dollar that goes through are dedicated to school building projects. We have, an effective reimbursement rate of almost 50% for the current school project that we have going. We know that Conant at some point is going to need to have something done, whether it's a renovation, a repair or replacement, we don't know until we go through the MSBA process. But what we want to do is prepare the community to be able to go into an MSBA process when MSBA has openings for us. So that's really what we're looking at doing right now.
So if I'm a Conant parent and I'm watching this for the first time and I don't know what you're talking about.
Don't get excited right now.
Okay, very good. Because nothing is happening to Conant. There's no emergency at Conant. Nothing bad is going on right now. We're staying in the pipeline.
This is about the fourth year or fifth year that we've put in an application for Conant in a row. And we're anticipating we have a couple more. I do want to be clear that we did find asbestos-containing ceiling tiles at Conant, which we've known about and have been in good condition and didn't need to be replaced. The engineer this year is recommending replacement. We actually just opened bids for that project and are anticipating doing the entire school over the course of this summer. So anything that needs to be done at Conant is being done in a timely fashion.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure it's all out there. Okay, so who would like to read more text verbatim?
Excuse me.
Yes, hi.
I'm just noticing that it's under form of vote, and I assume you're all reading from the same thing that I'm looking at. I think if you look at the end of the third line, after resolved, I don't suggest that you make a motion that starts with the word resolved or that starts with the phrase having convened. I think the appropriate thing, and I apologize for not taking that chunk out of the motion, but should say move to authorize the, so if you look at the third line where it starts resolved, move to authorize the superintendent to submit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would
They don't have to read the word resolved, but everything else they have to read. Yeah, we read the whole thing right out. Yeah, just read it right out. Yeah.
We're gonna be judging you on your fluency, just like what happened with. Thank you, Tessa. Wait, I'm sorry. Hi, Beth.
You can actually use tonight's date. We have until the 14th to submit, but if you put in tonight's date, we can submit it anytime after that.
Document will be dated 3/16 and also the date from the first line.
Correct. Yep.
So my inner middle schooler would just read date, because that's who I am. I just want to put that out there, just to be funny, but don't actually do that. Okay, great, thank you.
Having convened in an open meeting on March 16th, 2023, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee of the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the Statement of Interest form dated March 16th, 2023, for the Luther Conant Elementary School located at 80 Taylor Road, Acton, Mass., which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future for the following priorities. Priority 2, elimination of severe overcrowding. The building lacks the space to operate as a 3-section school while also accommodating other necessary programs to meet the needs of all students. Priority 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating and ventilation systems to increase energy efficiency and conservation and decrease energy-related costs in a school facility. Based on a facility study, the building was identified to be in need of over $22 million in capital needs and code upgrades, and additional funds to remediate hazardous materials contained within the building. Priority 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. The building is well over 50 years old, having been constructed in 1970, with the only updates being a roof in 1986 and boilers in 2007. Temporary modular classrooms were added in 1995 to address overcrowding. They are still in use 28 years later. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Seconded.
All right, thank you for your very fluent reading, Tessa. And that was Ben for another second. Good for you. We're voting on this, and this is not weighted. We can all just we can do it regular, right? Very good. Okay, so all those in favor? Aye. Thanks. Anybody not approve? Any abstentions? Very good. Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. And now on to the superintendent's mid-cycle goal review and roundup.
All right, so included in your information for tonight, and I apologize because with the snow day, Julie and I had some confusion between us, and I thought I had shared a document with her, she didn't get it, and it had been a long week. So I thought this went out earlier in the week to you, but it did not, so my apologies. But we did provide an update on goals for the school year. I want to thank all of the central office team for contributing to the update, because as I say every year, even though you get district goals that also become the superintendent's goals, it actually is the result of probably about 1,000 staff worth of work to try and get to those goals. And so, you know, I provided the update to you in an email, it's posted online. I would just make a couple of comments that overall, I think we're actually making reasonable progress toward the goals, and I'm pleased with the progress. You know, there's always going to be a couple of areas where you might be a little off target and you have to correct course. I don't see anything significant in that we're not going to meet year one goals. I will say that, similar to comments I shared at the beginning of the year, even though 3 goals may not seem like a lot on paper, the amount of work that takes for a district to be able to move things forward can be very significant, because it's not just about the goals are typically around what's changing and what's evolving, but then there's all the work that has to happen every day in every classroom as well. One of the things that we're doing with our elementary school educators right now and with our secondary schools coming up is to really look hard at the number of goals we're setting, but also what are the reasonable action steps that we can accomplish in a school year to make sure that we can take some of that burden off of our educators and create a level of sustainability for everyone and be very, very strategic and not compromising some of the important work that we're trying to move forward. Because I think there's a realization that we certainly have that if you try to do everything, but you're doing too much, you're actually not really doing anything very well. And so sometimes you have to, scale back a little to be able to prioritize and have a deeper impact than what you might otherwise have. Things are, going according to plan. I'll highlight, I think the MTSS rollout is a significant piece of work for the district to be able to undertake. I know our principals and all of the instructional leadership teams at all the schools have been working hard all year. Our educators have been engaged in grade level data meetings all year to try and really unpack that. The work looks just a little bit different in every school because every school has a little bit different starting point. But there's a consistency in terms of the process that we're using at each school. We are seeing positive student results, as I shared with you a little bit at a previous meeting. We are seeing that our kids are meeting growth targets so far for the year. So that's exciting, which was really what the goal of all the MTSS work was. In terms of mental health and social emotional learning, we've done considerable work at all of our K-8 schools around trauma-informed practices, and coursework that we've offered to our educators in that has been extremely popular. By the end of the school year, we'll have had about 100 educators complete a graduate course in trauma-informed practices. We intend to continue that work well beyond this year until we, have a substantial portion of our educators all implementing those practices. We also have done a lot of work with cartwheel care, which has been going extremely well. We have probably almost 125 referrals to date. 100% of the referrals that have been made into cartwheel care have had an intake meeting the next day and have started therapy within 5 school days of that intake. So that is an extraordinary turnaround time for access to mental health care. We're really very pleased with that, and it's going well. Cartwheel has also started to expand the services they're providing. They're now willing to go and serve younger students because they feel like they're having success. They have also, at our request, added parent consultation. So families who might have young kids or have a student who may not benefit from online therapy, now the family can actually consult with one of the cartwheel clinicians so they can get some strategies for home. And they've just been extraordinarily responsive, so we're really pleased with how that's going. And in terms of culturally responsive practices, we continue to do a lot of work. We have a group, we've expanded seed leader training and are offering more seed workshops now than we've ever been able to offer before. We're planning more for this summer. We have the national seed directors actually coming to our leadership retreat this summer with central office and principals, so we're excited about that. We also are in the process of training our first group of culturally responsive teacher leaders, and they're working through the DataWise book and the protocol for how to analyze data, and as well as Zaretta Hammond's culturally responsive practices in the brain. So a lot of brain-based research to why we're doing the culturally responsive work that we're doing. So that's kind of the overview of the update. As I said, the details are in there, but this is also an opportunity, I think, for the committee to offer me any feedback about any adjustments you'd like me to see as we, head through the last part of this school year.
And this is the talking part. Who has questions and comments? Hi, Rebecca.
I think this is a lot that's going on. It's all really good stuff. And it sounds like there's a good response to it. In terms of teachers, not just the leadership level, but how is everybody feeling about all of this that's going on in their schools?
I think it's a lot, quite honestly. I think, there are also unanticipated things that can really derail an implementation process. And let me give you an example. It's going to feel completely unrelated, but actually relates to MTSS directly. Getting substitutes and sub-coverage actually can impact how we implement MTSS. So I happened to be at Douglas one day talking to, I believe I think it was a 4th grade teacher, and they had done a lot of work around planning an intervention block or a flex block for their class where the math specialist had a plan to come in and work with a small group, the coach was working with some students, and then the teacher had planned a variety of activities for other students in the class. That takes a significant amount of planning time. And so we got to the day when that flex block was going to be implemented, and there was no sub available for another teacher in the building. And so now the math specialist had to be pulled out of that teacher's flex block and placed into the other classroom to just provide coverage. That derails an entire planning process, and we're seeing that systemically across the district, where if we can't get subs, our staff are being pulled in all sorts of different places, and that's very, very frustrating for people, because there's a lot of effort and planning that goes into something that's new, and then when that can blow up on you last minute because of something that you can't control, that can be frustrating too. There's no answer to that other than to try and increase subs. But just an example of how, improvement is not linear. There's, fits and starts to everything that you try and do. So, it's an anecdotal example, but I've heard that in more than one place, but that's certainly one of the places.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I want to make sure that teachers feel like they have the support that they need in order to get all of this done. Because looking at the list, it's all really important. So, I think the sustainability of the number of goals set each year, I think that makes perfect sense, but there's also this huge amount of stuff that does have to get done, so I'm glad that we're putting some extra money towards the substitute budget for hopefully tackling this issue.
Yeah, I think the area that we're still, MTSS won't be done this year. That's going to have to continue on multiple years, as well as our work in literacy and mathematics. So those really can't go away as goals. Additionally, student behaviors and adult responses to student behaviors are going to continue to have to be goals. And it was certainly embedded in the social emotional work we did between trauma-sensitive schools, all of the responsive classroom training, advisory programs and like. But we're still seeing student behaviors as challenges coming out of the pandemic, and it's a combination of lagging skills, a lack of kind of social interaction that kids experienced for a couple of years, a lack of kind of academic pressures that are normal, healthy academic pressures, but now seem extraordinary to kids because they haven't had them in the same way. So, we're going to still be spending a few years kind of regulating all of our students and helping them make sure they access the environments effectively. So I foresee essentially that a lot of the goals we set this year will probably come back in very similar form next year, but with different actions that we're taking as a result of the progress we made this year.
Do we have, I see the baseline iReady data. Do we have any other student data? Can anybody talk a little bit about whether or not we've seen any changes in iReady mid-year? Is that possible? Even if it's from the hip, just give me anything.
Sure. So for all of the grades for literacy and for math, if you think about 4 quadrants, at the mid-year point, as an aggregate, all of our students for all of the grades, for all of the schools were in the upper right quadrant. So there was high growth and high academic sort of outcomes, which is great. So we're seeing that trajectory. What we're doing now is we're looking at student groups to see if student groups, is according to our Student Opportunity Act as well, where students are in terms of their typical growth and then their stretch growth. And again, we're seeing some real positive movement in terms of the typical growth, not as much in the stretch growth. So that's the place we're again continuing to focus on, because in order to close that gap, students have to make up their stretch growth goal. But we're not far off. At the mid-year point, we're between 40 and 50% for the median, which is about where you'd want students. It would be great if they were about at 60%, but we're about between 40 and 50% right now. So we're keeping a close eye on that and having conversations with principals around the data meetings.
So I think then we're looking at 2 more assessment periods this year, the MCAS and 1 more iReady, is that correct? And when's the last iReady?
The last iReady will take place in around May, I believe, the end of April, beginning of May. So trying to separate out the MCAS time so it doesn't happen all at once for students. Yeah.
We're hoping to be able to bring some of that iReady data back for the final goals update, so that the committee can actually see the progress that was made. Because if you recall, that was a shift we wanted to make this year, was not just talking about goals being process of what we want to do, but actually seeing the impact on kids. And so we're hopeful that we can bring some of that back.
Alrighty then, we are on to subcommittee and member reports. Hi, Adam, you got here just in time. Would you like to make a report about budget side?
Did I miss the discussion of school committee reorganization? Just
Sometimes the chair just wants to skip stuff, you know what I mean? It's just like, just Freudian
your
slip.
prerogative.
I really just was avoiding things. I was hoping y'all would just not notice that I was avoiding that. Okay, so we are coming back to the discussion about the school committee reorganization. I actually don't know where to start with this. Do you want to start that? Does anybody have a comment about that? Adam, do you want to start with something?
I'll start, but I think I'm very quickly going to turn it over to everybody this direction of the table. And just, I'm curious if the members of the committee who will be here next year and will be here after May have had any other thoughts or suggestions about how we want to handle this. I'll start with that, and then I can share some thoughts and conversations I've had in the interim.
Does anybody need a recap, or we know what we're talking about? Yeah, hi, Jen.
I'd love to hear what your thoughts and conversations are.
So where we left it last time is that, we wanted to extend the opportunity for someone to maybe take an interim leadership position through the end of the year for about 3 meetings. But in consultation with the superintendent, one of the other things that came up was there's a great deal of planning that has to happen for the summer during those last few months of the year. And it may be a challenge for someone to take that on, as well as learning the role. And so I thought that was really good feedback from Peter. And I still think it's important that new members of the committee have an opportunity to sit towards the head of the table to understand what's entailed in being the chair. Because Ginny and I can't be the chair every time, and even if we are, we still need vice chairs, and I think that there's lots of opportunity for improvement in the position of the vice chair to take on some of that role and responsibility. That's sort of where I left it with Peter. The big takeaway is with our committee being so new next year, there's a great deal of work and planning and strategy that maybe needs to go into a summer workshop. That being said, I'm happy to sign up to do that part of the work if someone is still interested, to try to chair the committee for a couple months, again, to dip their toe in the water, see if it's something they want to continue to do.
I think the guest host idea is a bad one for consistency's sake. You can see there's a TV show, The Daily Show. Trevor Noah left. Trevor Noah left, and now every week they have a different host in. And every week you've got the same hosts kind of getting their feet wet, understanding what happens, and by the time they're ready to leave, another one comes in. You can't have consistency, you can't have build, you can't plan for the future, and we're still at a transition point. We got budget issues, we got school issues, we got cultural issues. I think if we can get somebody in who can just pick up and do for the rest of the year, it will be better to form a stronger committee than it would simply to give people an opportunity to play. Giving people an opportunity to play at this field is absolutely important, and growing into the next school committee, we need to have opportunities for everyone to be able to stand up and talk. But I think the guest host thing is not the best path for us to go on.
I think that makes sense. Like, reflecting on the discussion last week, before coming here tonight, I was thinking that obviously the new members that get elected will have a vote on who is chair and vice chair, but it's probably going to be from those of us that are sitting here anyway, because we have more experience. So I think it makes sense what Andrew's saying, to move towards looking at who's interested in putting their hat into the ring for the rest of the year.
I'm going to actually regret saying this, but it doesn't sound like there's anybody who's willing to step up for the next 3 months to chair that seat. If there's nobody who's willing to step up, I've chaired committees in the past. I know Robert's Rules of Order. If there's not one single person who's willing to do so, I will put myself up there, if that's the case.
So is the suggestion, because it doesn't matter to me, because I'm not going to be here to vote. But is the suggestion that you're still going to vote as soon as everyone is elected for the chair for next year? Or you're going to have somebody chair and then do the vote like we were doing it later?
I think no matter what, we have to bypass some of our, we have to vote to bypass some of our existing policies. If we wait for the first meeting after the committee reorganizes, then that person could be voted in and could fulfill the balance of this year's term and serve for next year if so interested. Or we could vote for someone to take up for 3 meetings, and then at the same time or at another date, we could vote for someone for next year. Again, no matter what, we have to vote to upset a whole bunch of our policies. There's no way around that. It's unclear.
My personal thought, having come onto the committee at a time when the committee was in utter chaos, and not knowing what was going on and not knowing the players and everything else, I do think that there's a significant amount of work that happens during a year that it's worth either Ben taking over until like the whole committee is a committee and voting maybe in September, to reorganize or whatever, because I think that if we were to vote, if the committee were to vote once the 2 new Boxborough members and the 3 new Acton members, like at their first meeting, when they've never served on school committee, they don't know most of the people sitting at the table, they don't know the dynamics of the committee, they don't know what the responsibility is of school committee, they don't know any of those things. I just think that that's not a wise way to choose a leader. And I think that if you were to, if it's Ben or whatever, to step up until the end of the summer, even, right? And get through the summer meeting, get through what has to be done. I mean, Ben served on the committee long enough to understand what maybe the work is to onboard new members. And then for those new members, all of those 11 people, to say, okay, what does leadership look like and where is our school committee going and who do we want to elect? And have people really step up at that point and say, yes, I'm interested in doing this. It's such an awkward time to lead. I mean, no matter how we've done it, right? It was awkward when, I was elected at the end of the school year and then worked with the chair before to work on the summer thing together, and then you take over there's no really non-awkward way to do it. But I think that with such an overall new committee, the more information you can give the voting members of the committee in terms of the dynamics of the committee and the way you work together and what the basic rules and roles are, I feel like that makes for a stronger foundation for what you're going to do going forward. So my sense would be that if Ben is willing to step up after, I still have to chair 1 meeting, right? That interim one, okay. So after that, if Ben's willing to step up because he's done the basic work of chairing a board, which is at this point in the year all you have to do. There's not a lot of planning involved in that, but work with maybe past chairs or whoever on what does a summer meeting, what does a summer workshop look like, and then bypass all our rules, as you said, and think about making a vote in September at one of those first meetings to choose a reorganization so that people are really aware of what the roles are and what the responsibilities are in order to, I know that makes things difficult for subcommittees, there's always a domino effect of decision, but it seems like with so much newness, at least people would be going in with more information.
First, thank you. I have a point of clarification. Adam, did you say that you would be willing to be an interim chair? Because I thought I heard you say that.
I'm willing to serve however the committee wants me to. So I'm not against sitting as the chair, either interim or for next year if we vote all of that. I'm just responding to feedback from the committee previously, and I think sort of a general concern around the same people doing the same jobs over and over again.
Yeah.
I am more than happy to serve.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think that I just want, to acknowledge there's no good solution that's going to lead to a seamless transition of any variety or ease of constituting subcommittees or ease of planning process or anything. Like, this is just, a multi-pronged problem that we're experiencing. So, there are going to be significant downsides to any plan we come up with. So I just want to say that, because whatever somebody suggests, then somebody can say, yeah, but then that we're going to have, XYZ problem. And that is probably true, but there's going to be ABC problem with the other one, and there's going to be some other problems with a different plan. So we're in a difficult place, and but kind of following on what Tessa was saying, I do see the issues with regard to having a guest host, but I do not feel ready to vote for a leader for next year anytime soon. I don't see how anybody can do that. And I think that it's just elevating form over substance to say we're going to take that vote, and we might end up in a worse position than we would be, even though there's going to be some duplicative efforts, et cetera, if there's a guest host. So, and I also think that at this time of year and in the spring in general, it is a little hard for many people to understand what the, post-summer year is going to look like. And I recognize that, people have stepped up and made that commitment before. I just think that, if we could widen the field of potential candidates, in that way, it wouldn't be a terrible thing either. So I'll stop talking.
I think you make some very good points, Ginny, and it makes me think. We went and rewrote this policy a couple of years ago because we knew the transition was awkward. I think what we're learning is even still the timing doesn't work out well. And I wonder if it's something worth consulting with the administration around. When's the worst time to switch a leader, and when's the best time to put somebody in that seat? Because what you're saying, and the situation that we have this year may not be unique in the future, but what we're saying is new members are going to join our committee, and within a meeting, they're going to have to vote who's going to be their leader for the next year, knowing absolutely nothing. One of the things that we could look at is, well, what if we elect a leader for the following year at some point in the middle of the year? What if we switch leadership in the middle? I'm throwing, I think, some of the conversations that Peter and I had were that, okay, well, maybe the meetings feel less challenging to run towards the end of the year, but there's a whole lot of support that the administration needs in terms of planning goals, planning meetings, setting up for the beginning of the next year that happens at the end of the year, and they need consistency there. So maybe us switching our leadership at that time of the year is not right. So I wonder if we take this opportunity this year as a unique situation to vote to bypass our policy and pick a time period that says we're going to vote for a chair who's going to serve from the time after everybody's seat is seated until some point in the middle of next year, so that we have time for everybody to know each other and decide what and if we're going to do, and or what you're going to run again. And then, or we vote at that point and we say, okay, this person is going to serve the entirety of the balance of this term and next year's term from a consistency standpoint.
Okay, so I'm going to flag that it's 8:30. I see that Tessa's hand is up, and I see that Marie's hand is up. Can I give it to Marie first? Yeah. Cool. Hi, Marie.
I mean, either way is fine. This is clearly not my issue, other than I've attended meetings with chairs and the superintendent for many years in this role. I just want to, and I was on the policy when the last couple of changes were made. There's one thing you could do. So it's a shared leadership. Everybody on the committee has a leadership role. The design to have a chair and two vice chairs a vice chair from each town was done, A, to split up the vast responsibility of the committee, and B, to provide a succession plan process that could work. I can't think of a time when all three people in those seats were leaving at the same time. I think Kyra is saying next meeting is the last meeting, basically, that all three of them will be in their seats. And then you have 2 town meetings. So I'm just going to make a suggestion, having heard your conversation at the last 2 meetings. There are 3 important leadership roles that need to be voted. I think you need a chair at all times. So maybe you vote a chair at the April meeting that will carry through for the next year, and then you decide when to vote the 2 vice chairs. And between now and April, anyone who's interested in any one of those 3 positions can run for chair or whatever. Do it any way you want to do it. I'm just throwing out there a possibility that you separate chair from vice chair so that you at least, I'm sure there are multiple people at the table right now who are interested in one of those 3 positions. And so if those folks voice their interest, take it from there and maybe at least get yourself a chair sometime soon. Just a suggestion.
I was just going to say that going even further back than when Adam was discussing, we had these discussions of whether a chair should be there for 2 years or, this whole succession. And I'm not suggesting that that's the case at all. I think that that goes against what some members of this committee have said in terms of, like people always having the same positions and everything like that. And I hear that. I think that we have a funny setup and that we have 3-year rolling terms, but we have to think about that. Adam's last year is next year, right? Unless he decides to run again. And we could be potentially setting ourselves up. I would not want Adam to make that decision now as to what he was going to do for the next time. I think that it's really hard and awkward and something that's always, it's something that should be taken into consideration because this does set up a very awkward situation. I think the other thing I would say is that we have not yet come up with a good way to divide the workload in all the 6 years that I have been on the committee. The vice chairs have done relatively nothing other than stand in for when the chair can't attend a meeting. And I think that sometimes those vice chairs have been able to take on responsibilities within some of the subcommittees, but that's not always the case either. So, whatever happens, whatever you agree to, I think the next chair needs to really think about how we share that role. And I think the difficulty is that when a new chair takes over, you want to take that all in, but you're not taking it all in with the vice chair sitting next to you. You're like meeting with the superintendent and the administration and doing it by yourself. And then it's up to that person to sort of delegate roles. It's very complicated. And so I don't disagree with what Marie says, but for the 6 years that I've been on the committee, the vice chair role is the very accessory sort of role. Like you don't really do anything as vice chair other than possibly be in the pipeline for, taking over as chair. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But I don't know. I would be in favor of electing a chair until things are settled down, maybe in January, but I don't mean January, September, but maybe Peter's not in favor of that because stuff needs to get done. I think it's a difficult situation. I think as far as the committee goes, it would be better to wait until there's more information and people know the players involved to choose a leader, but I understand that responsibility-wise, that's not ideal either.
Okay, so for the sake of movement, I believe that the options on the table are voting to suspend the policy for now while y'all are figuring it out, or y'all can roll this boulder up the hill, not at the next meeting, because I'm in charge and I don't want to do this next meeting. So, but maybe during Tessa's meeting. What would you like to do?
My suggestion is to revert to the superintendent's original recommendation, which is the meeting following Tessa's last meeting, once everyone is seated, to run an election at that point with the new committee and elect a chair to serve out the balance of this year and the entirety of next year. I think what I'm hearing is that that's good from consistency standpoint. And maybe at that first meeting, once the chair is elected, they can facilitate a conversation with the new committee around their desire to elect vice chairs at that point, or wait until September to elect vice chairs. But that can be an item for discussion at that meeting that we reorganize. I think from an efficiency standpoint, we should vote to suspend our policy once. We should do that when we have the new committee seated, so that there's no sense of an outgoing committee voting for a chair for next year. And then that new committee gets to decide how they want to organize following that. No, there is, yeah, I mean, the superintendent can call the meeting to order and run the reorganization at that point.
I'm going to welcome a ghost from Christmas past. Are you good? Come on.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Hold on, Mr. Peterson.
You can stand there. I'll just,
Hold on. Hi, Amy.
I just want to say, I mean, that is the way it's been done. It's not ideal, but I also have noticed that the majority of people that are on the ballot have been at our meetings and are well informed of kind of what's going on. So I think that that's a good suggestion.
There are likely also quick studies. Likely. We'll see. Hello, Mr. Peterson.
So I have no suggestion for the immediate challenge in front of you, but I did want to build on Tessa's comment about how the vice chairs are used and options that you have to try and develop leadership. And as Tessa said, the vice chairs have been used to run meetings when the chair is not available. And clearly the committee could make a decision that said, no, we're going to commit that every year that a vice chair, will run a meeting, we'll plan it that way, and that will do two things. One is that will give the vice chair the practical experience, and that will give the committee the opportunity to see the vice chair in action. And then the second thing that people often do in developing people for new jobs is to do job shadowing. So it clearly is within the capability of the chair to invite members to shadow for a meeting or a couple meetings so that people will be exposed to the process and again understand their level of interest, what the requirements are, and all of that I think would help with transition.
Good Senator Peterson in here with two good pieces of advice. All right, I'm ready to move on. Are we all ready to move on? Are we taking the suggestion, Adam? Was there a consensus that we're taking the suggestion, this is how we're going? Very good. All right, thank you. Now we can move along to subcommittee reports.
Budget subcommittee met this past Monday. Since I missed the budget presentation from earlier, we most likely discussed what you discussed earlier this evening, and in addition to that, we discussed our strategy for town meeting presentation.
That's not what happened at all. So, oh no. Now what are you going to do? No, that's totally what happened. Okay, great. Thank you. And policy sub.
Hi, I'd like to invite Erin up, and if I could go to that mic. Thank you.
Hi, Erin.
So let me just quickly introduce Erin. If you don't know Erin, I think Erin might be one of the longest-serving, hardest-working people in the district. She is regularly in her office late at night, on weekends, all hours of the day. She has taught in community education, extended day programming when need be because we don't have enough staff. And she also has to coordinate basically all aspects of the district that are not happening during the school day. Is a lot of what really Erin does. One of the things that she does is manage our building use process. And so she kind of has the unique insight into how building use functions across the district, including, various costs, groups that use programs, things like that. And so, over the last several years, Erin and I have been talking about some of the challenges associated with escalating costs to the district, whether they're custodial costs or energy costs, things like that, of keeping our buildings open and available. And we knew we wanted to have a discussion with the school committee about what that means and have the committee re-examine some of the fee structures for things. So Erin and Andrew, got together to initially work with Policy Sub. This has been through the Policy Sub and is coming to the committee for a first read and an opportunity to hear some feedback and comments. But Ginny, I'll turn it over to you and Erin to fill in the gaps.
Thank you. So like pretty much everything that comes to policy, nothing is simple and everything is much more complicated and multi-layered than it at first appears. And so, we've been wrestling with this for several meetings in a row, for a few months now. So I just wanted to say that because I want you all to know that there's been significant thought and work, and definitely a lot of work by Erin that's gone into all of this. So, the reason that this came, like Peter said briefly before policy, is because we needed to update our use policy by outside groups to reflect the fact that energy costs have significantly increased, as have the district's ability to shut down various portions of buildings and understand, it's not like, all the lights in the whole building would have been on, so it doesn't really matter if a group is using a classroom, et cetera, or the heat or whatever. Now, with all of the smart innovations that have been made through a lot of work by a lot of people, we're being much more energy efficient and can therefore shut down, whole buildings and parts thereof. So we want to make sure that when we are renting to groups that, the district is not losing money through energy costs. And there's all kinds of staffing. And as you've seen, I trust you've all read your materials, there's different staffing, cleanup, there's all kinds of different costs. But energy costs was a big one that's been growing. And then the other glaring issue that we have, which is in line with a lot of the other work that we're doing as a committee as a whole, is moving towards more equitable policies, procedures, and that's certainly something that we wanted to do here because it has been the case in our school district. There have been, certain groups that have enjoyed a favored status in terms of paying for the, the use of our facilities before. And, we have a wide variety of wonderful, wonderful groups that do really wonderful work and, enrich our community and our children in all kinds of ways. So this is, we appreciate them all, and it's our hope to move forward and, treat them all equitably, for, I think, obvious reasons. So, that's really kind of the background here, and I don't know if, Erin, you want to add anything. The other hidden cost that's not reflected in any of this is the work that it takes to schedule and keep track of folks who are using our district's facilities, and that falls on Erin, and it really is an unreflected cost of staff time and, and dedication to get it all done correctly. So,
can I just... I'm just going to give a little context to those of you. I haven't been before the committee in a really long time, so it's been a while since I've given the big picture on how our schools are used by our community. Prior to COVID, the last year we have full year data, we had 1,470 reservations for use of our schools, fields, facilities, which were turned into 9,899 individual events and activities. That might be a classroom, might be whatever. Obviously, COVID really changed things and we were shut down for a while, but we're building back rapidly. And so right now, at this point in the year, we've processed 730 building use requests for over 5,000 individual events. So the buildings are getting used again, and it just continues to grow. And again, another point to help understand that is there are 3 levels of classes, so to speak, 3 ways we group the people who use our buildings. We call it class 1, which is anything school related and municipal related. So
regular school events, PTO events, booster events, all those kinds of events are Class 1. Class 2 are Acton-Boxborough nonprofits. So that's organizations that are based in our community, that serve our community, and consist of at least 50%, or the majority of their members are people who live in Acton-Boxborough. And then Class 3 is just everyone else. So just to give you a context of how much is involved here, I thought that might be helpful for you to hear.
So again, this is just before the committee for a first read, and we're going to be taking it back to policy and tightening it up. I already found one thing that I would like changed, just in terms of language, but we are just putting it out there for your feedback at this time.
So for the folks who are in the audience who are playing at home or playing at their seats, who don't have the materials in front of them, can you tell us a little bit about the proposed changes that you're making to this policy?
Sure. Do you want to?
Yeah, would you like me to? Yeah. Really, the conversation is about two main areas that we were looking at when we reviewed the use of facilities, policies, and fees. And they came from direction we got from leadership as we've been working on budgets over the last few years, to think about equity and to think about looking at our budgets really carefully and where can we tighten things up, where can we do better. And so obviously community ed comes at a different way than other parts of the school district. But when I took that to heart and looked at what we're doing and how we use the facilities and make them available for the community, I kept hearing about energy costs rising dramatically for the district, and that being a real concern, and efforts to be more, to do better at saving energy throughout the year. And so we set energy fees back in 2016, and those have been the same energy fees we've used since then. Clearly, we know the costs have risen tremendously, so that was one thing to look at. The other thing was back in 2016, which sounds like the dark ages now, the buildings were busy all the time. And so we took the high school entirely out of energy fees because we said, there's stuff happening that's ours all the time. It's ablaze with lights and energy. We can't figure that out. No energy fees apply at the high school. And that's really different now. The high school, again, as Ginny mentioned, our ability to turn off and on certain systems, certain portions of the buildings, power down, everything has evolved since that time. So the energy piece is a combination of costs have simply gone up and we've got to adjust our charges accordingly. And how did we apply those energy fees back at the time? So we proposed to adjust the energy costs accordingly, and also to add energy fees to high school use, and also expand it to weeknight use. Again, back in 2016, when we started this effort, we thought all the buildings were used all night, and it's just not that way anymore, and we do power down. And so energy is turned on for certain activities based upon the weekly report that ComEd sends out every week. So that's a big thing. And then the equity issue had to do with looking at particularly any organizations that didn't align maybe with the general spirit of it in the sense of class 1, class 2, class 3, and try to talk about, are they still special? Should they have special status? Or are those items we want to maybe evolve at this time? So Scouts became one that we looked at because they were called out, especially in the old policy document, which existed since I don't know how long before I got here. That's been a group. And then travel basketball came out as an organization because they had a special arrangement made by a superintendent over 10 years ago for what their cap would be on their rental activities. And so again, we wanted to take a look at that. It's been a long time. Is that still the way we want to treat that organization, or did we want to do something differently? And so we made a proposal and talked to the subcommittee on that. So it's really looking at a couple of different arrangements and then trying to bring the energy policies into 2023.
I appreciate the work. One of the things that I'm struggling with is understanding what this means for some of the standard users of our facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you guys have done in your analysis, here's how the Scouts would have been charged under the old, here's what their cost may be. clearly the committee got a letter from the travel basketball team. And I think it would be helpful for us to model some of those too, just to understand, I think the work we're doing around standardizing and providing equitable cost structure to everybody is really important, but I also think it's important to understand how that change is going to affect specific programs, but also sort of a standard user of our facilities, because I think it can be pretty difficult to go from not being charged any energy fee for using any space in the high school, because we couldn't measure that before, to having a specific energy fee per hour based on the size of the room that you're in. I think that's great that we can do that. But what I struggle with here is that there's too many moving parts, and it's hard to understand what the change is from before to now.
Sure. So I can quantify, I think pretty well, what we did with travel basketball was we went back and looked at their invoice for last year, and we translated into the new proposed parameters. And last year, travel basketball's entire invoice, and it's not insignificant, was $17,528. Of that, $5,000 was a cap on rental. It didn't matter how many gyms they used, how long they were there, anything like that, $5,000 for rental. And the rest was energy fees where they applied, because they use other buildings, not just the high school, and then custodial cleanup costs. When we did that under the new proposed parameters, the bill went to $26,600, so a significant increase of $9,000. We met with travel basketball. We invited several of the organizations who would be dramatically impacted to come in and meet with Andrew Shen and myself and share feedback about how this would affect their groups. And so there are ways travel basketball, for example, could minimize some of those costs. They could put more teams in gyms for practice. They could try to stack more practices on top of each other in one space, because they pay a per date rate as a Class 2 person. There are reasons why those aren't ideal for them as an organization and the athletes and the type of things but there are ways sort of to meet in the middle, I think, a little bit. We did also encourage any of the groups to put forth proposals on maybe getting to somewhere different down the road if it was too big of a leap. So that's just one example, because travel was easy. I had their very detailed bill from last year, and I could, I tried to do some back of the envelope calculations of another couple of organizations, because forgive me, the use of facility software at the moment for some reason can't run a report by an organization, which is perfect timing. It's been that way since about the first of the year, and our vendor is hearing a lot from Aaron Battez at Community Ed. And some of the scout groups who are here tonight might have better numbers, but I did a couple of quick analyses. So AB Girl Scouts uses 2 classrooms at the high school, 2 nights a week, all year round, every week. And they pay $10 a year, because that's how we have it under the current policy. Any scout group for a regular meeting can pay $10 a year. They pay, appropriate rates for special things like I'm blanking. What do you call it? Thank you very much. Pinewood Derby. How could I'm a scout mom. How did I forget that? So for instance, AB Girl Scouts, $10 a year for really significant, great meeting space. Theirs would jump for both rental and energy fees to $4,608 for those same meetings under the new thing. So that's massive. I totally acknowledge that. And then Troop 32, my boys are proud graduates, and they have used for the last maybe 2 years or so space at schools, and it typically is a cafeteria space, a library, small meeting space, and a gym. They've used Blanchard, they used Douglas last year. They're spending some time in the admin building. If you're here on Wednesday nights, it's pretty hopping, I would tell you. And when I tried to translate that into a number, $6,720 that would be for a year of weekly meetings in typical spaces like that with energy fees applied. So, there's a couple of snapshots for you. Other groups are not as impacted. United Swim Club is a swim club that rents the pool at the high school almost 7 days a week throughout the year. So they would be adding energy fees on top of their rate. They're a Class 3 group. They pay a high hourly rate. And so when we looked at the energy fees associated, it kind of takes out only, they qualify for our frequent user. We have a frequent user rental discount. That translated almost equivalent to that amount. So for them, it's an increase for sure, something they didn't pay. but it wasn't shocking because of the nature of that organization and how they work. So every situation is a little bit different. Certainly groups that use lots of space and pay $10 a year, this is an extraordinary jump. And I'd be happy to do more analyses if there are other groups people are interested in. It's just, until I can run that report by a group, it's a little bit tricky. So, but I hope, Adam, that gives you some of the context of the change.
Just one quick comment too, to just jump, a little bit onto what Erin was saying. I know internally the discussions we had as administration was, it's hard, because we don't want to devalue what any group does, but it's hard to also place any inherent higher or lower value on how different groups use it, other than through the categories. And that was something we really grappled with through the process. Like, we recognize that some groups, have different rates historically, but as we move forward, there's an inherent value statement to other new groups that might want to now use the facility around why they may pay higher or lower rates that, I think when questioned, it becomes hard for us to be able to give a good answer to. And so that was some of the thinking too around why we looked at this policy and trying to get to a standardized rate over time.
Maybe just a suggestion, or I don't know if this is something that you guys have already discussed, but would there, because honestly, I think that it is expensive, and I mean, this is just the reality that I think that we do need to start charging more for these services. Has there been any discussion about not exactly grandfathering some of these very highly impacted groups, but maybe staggering the increases to make that easier?
Yeah, I think the policy subcommittee had a variety of opinions on that topic, and it was part of the conversation. So certainly something that is, I think, important to consider as maybe someone's here and they need to get here, but it's too far at one point. Could we figure out a way to do it along the way? When we first implemented energy fees in 2016, what we did do for that whole entire year, once they were set, was for anybody renting space, we'd say, this is your bill today, but if this was next year, this is what it would be, to try to give them time to help plan. So that's another thing we would want to do for sure for any of these groups. Whatever we implement is make sure we give enough time for these groups to prepare for that change that's coming. I sat on the policy subcommittee for a while, so I know how hard you grappled with this. But is there a sense of what percentage of users fall into group 1 and 2 versus group 3? Only knowing the number of reservations, I don't know how many actual groups there are. Again, it's 70% are class 1 events, and then 25% are class 2, and then 5% are class 3. I guess the reason I ask that is because as community ed, your mission is to provide, activities and things like that that benefit the community and that are affordable and things like that. I mean, that's why people look for community ed things, right? They're cheaper than going to Teamworks or, something else that's privately owned. So I think, having been a Girl Scout leader for 12 years and, understanding the limitations that come with that, that's a group, or these are groups, and I think the sports groups as well, because they fall into a category where they're providing something that is less expensive than other athletic activities or other, group activities. And that's equity for kids that can't participate in these other things. So I understand. I'm not really contributing anything other than to realize that most of the people that we're renting to fall within that category that follows your mission.
So Adam and then Tori.
First of all, I struggle with this because it's an expense that the district bears almost no matter what. And so in a year like this, where we have a very difficult budget year, we look often to the users of our facilities off hours to help defray our custodial costs, our energy costs, so that we can provide time on learning with our kids with, excellent educators in the district. And so I think it's important for us as a district and as sort of the financial oversight body of the district to say, we need to make sure that we protect our funds for the true mission of the district, understanding that community ed has a revenue source for that. At the same time, it's the same community, it's almost the same tax dollars, except now we're going and saying instead of the entire community funding the facilities, the energy that these other groups are using, those groups need to pay for it. And I will say right now, I'm sort of struggling with that. I think it's hard to balance. My question is, in regards to the policy and the discussion, was there some ability or discussion in the policy subcommittee about granting the Director of Community Education the authority to phase in some of these increases over a series of years? So even still, a $9,000 increase for a community organization, giving them a heads up 6 months out is very nice, but it may still be pretty detrimental to their program. Nor do I want you guys to come back to us next year and say, hey, can we raise the rates again? Can we raise the rates again? Is there some authority that we can grant for the Director of Community Education to make some of those grandfathered organizations, give them a longer runway to get up to the standard rates?
I wasn't given that power, but I think it's an interesting way to proceed to come in with a phased approach for sure. If I got to vote, which I didn't, I was just the person providing information, I would lean that way myself because I understand the challenge.
We did discuss having a phase-in. I don't think that there was anyone that I recall that was, outright opposed to that. It's again just, the struggle between how to explain, groups that have been paying the going rate all of this time versus groups that have not and have had special status. It's just that same struggle between those two things, because all of the groups do valuable, activities, and there are some groups that have gotten a significant break for as long as we can recall. So I don't think that anybody was opposed to that, and it was discussed.
I think that's my one piece of feedback for the policy subcommittee, is to take a look at that. I mean, we're going to struggle with that for those people in kindergarten who the year afterwards it was free. They're going to be like, well, I had to pay $3 grand, 18 grand, whatever. So it's a problem we're going to have to struggle with throughout, but I would suggest that the policy subcommittee look at a clause in there that is time-bound, that says there's a phase-in period for anyone who's over a certain amount of percentage increase, something like that, that really sort of targets that, but also recognizes that challenge, but also brings forward the sort of equity and fairness in the billing.
Hi, Tori.
Tori Campbell, 477 Mass Ave, and I apologize for having missed the opportunity to introduce myself. I'm one of the school committee candidates as well. Thank you all for this thoughtful discussion. This is a really tough thing to work through, and for the work that the policy committee has been doing. I want to make sure that I understand this completely, because I'd like to be able to provide some meaningful feedback. I have some involvement with some of the organizations involved here. My first question was, as I looked at it, it looks like there are kind of 3 big boxes of categories for regular use. You've got energy costs, that's a no-brainer. You've got custodial costs, I get that. I'm wondering about the facility use. Does that go to offset some other sort of fee, like perhaps Aaron? Or is that a profit to the district, or what does the facility use fee go to?
Essentially, any monies that are brought into the use of facilities revolving fund, that's one of Community Ed's funds, then go back to whatever activities relate to that fund. So in the sense of, it could go back to paying a custodial salary, it could go back to repairing a facility. It's limited to going back into the facilities from which the funds were generated. So currently, none of my salary is tagged there. I think some should be. But, and the software is $6,000 a year to schedule. So those are real costs that, I hope that answers. I'll stop blathering.
Okay, totally fair. So yeah, costs that might be somewhat borne by the people who are using it, but are also kind of covered by the other uses that we have of these facilities on a day-to-day basis, school, community ed, et cetera. Is that fair?
And Community Ed contributes back over $300,000 a year to the district to general utility costs. So again, that can be a source for that if we needed it as well. So
okay.
Can I provide just one more example? I'm so sorry. Aaron, I think you contributed to some capital improvements over time as well. I know one thing we track always is kind of lower fields, and when are those going to need to be replaced, the turf condition, things like that. How do we make sure we extend the life, but also be able to have a reserve account to be able to fund some of that? Aaron, didn't you do some scoreboards at one point as well in the junior high, if I recall?
Yep, we also put the marquee sign out on Route 111 out of use of facilities money. That was like a $40,000 bill. So it all goes back to the district and the little bits kind of add up over time.
Do we have a feel for how much those Class 2 and Class 3 organizations bring into the district through the use fees?
I don't think I could give you a great, clear response to that, but I'd be happy to do some research for you.
I'm actually, I'd be curious about that. Cool. Thank you. So my next question was, there are kind of three groups that are referred to in this document. So Scouts are called out by name. There's others not specified because there may be some other agreements out there that we don't know about. And then also youth sports. And so I was curious about why we're focused on the Scout groups and why the youth sports don't pay the facility use, why that, was that something you discussed? What's the difference there?
So before you answer that, I just want to be cool and say, you're doing a great job. But,
oh, I'm sorry.
No, so is that your last question though, or do you have more
the only
after
other question I had was, how do I provide input? Because I couldn't find it on the website, but I can ask that afterwards.
Right, thank you.
So youth sports are unique in the sense of most of the fields and facilities they play on, they helped build or rebuild, and so they've contributed a lot of capital monies up front for those projects. It's something we're talking about over time, but there's an explicit MOU with the baseball field, for instance, when that was created, that says they will never pay anything ever. So the lights go on and we absorb that because we made an agreement with AB Youth Baseball, the town of Acton, and the school district using CPA money back in that day, and that was the agreement that went into effect. At the lower fields currently, though, AB Youth Soccer, AB Youth Lacrosse, AB Girls Youth Lacrosse, and Pop Warner put in significant monies to build those facilities. At this point, they are now paying for all the utilities and directly, we bill them directly for hours of utility costs, and they pay for custodial cleanup on the weekends because those people are there expressly to clean up for their activities. So we're looking at the fields and facilities in youth sports and trying to bring those fairly in online with the parameters of all the agreements that went into building them over time. But that's on a future year's list. We thought we couldn't bring it all in right away, but we know that's something to look at as well.
Okay, and do we know that doesn't exist from any of the original scouting agreements? Because I'm hearing it may be about 3 decades.
I don't know anything other than there's always been a line in there. I have no history on it.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
So Tori, if you or any of the Scout communities would like to give feedback, you can also have folks send feedback to the school committee at abrhs@abschools.org. Hello.
Hi, my name is John Yerich. I'm with Troop 32 and Troop 12 Acton. And I know there's a lot of people from the scouting community here tonight. In fact, I'd like to welcome everyone to stand up if you're part of the scouting community here in Acton-Boxborough. You've been part of it.
I know.
Ben, I know your son's in the troop. Okay, I don't know everyone. You said you were in Girl Scouts. Scouting has, thank you everybody. Scouting has been an enormous part of this community for a very long time. Camp Acton across town was donated by the Scouts to the town. Okay, the fees that we're looking at basically make it that this is not a viable place for us. We can't afford it. For our annual dues that we charge our Scouts, for our operating costs, we keep $30 per Scout. We would have to charge at least an extra $100 per Scout to use the facilities here. You just can't do it. It's not affordable. It basically makes us homeless. And you're basically putting out an organization whose sole job it is to work with youth, to train them into leaders of tomorrow, and to give back to the community. You talk about service to the community. I have photos on my phone. We did a service project today. We did a cleanup at Blanchard because we were meeting there. We did our fall cleanup there. Okay? You talk about things like the money from the service fees and stuff like that, which, you know, I still question, going towards useful things like helping the fields. I see those as viable things. Why is our use of using the cafeterias, which probably haven't been updated in a very long time, paying to go to fix the fields where the sports teams are not paying to upgrade the fields that they're using? I really think that if you want to look at some balance on some stuff, you have to look at what those organizations are giving back to the community. Thank you.
Hi, Jason.
Yes, hello. I am a member of the Acton-Boxborough Youth Soccer Board. I want to make it absolutely clear that we are paying for the use of lower fields, and there's a lot of money that is outlaid from the sports teams that go into the maintenance, and the original, as you know, Aaron, the MOUs are wildly complicated, but built those fields. I also have a Boy Scout and 3 Girl Scouts, so I'm very sensitive to the values of scouting. So I do want to make sure that we understand that the fields, the sporting groups are paying for it, but also that, yes, the Scouts could not absorb this cost. It would put them right out of the, and the Girl Scouts really, it's such a nominal use of the facilities. It's school by school, during the day, right after school. So well, I've said my piece on it. It would be really hard for them, well, if not impossible, for them to absorb those costs and continue to meet at the school. Thank you.
Good sir, Peterson.
John Peterson. Equity is hard. Equity is really hard. And I know that you as a group and the district have struggled with, how to do things that, have deep equity in them. There are lazy ways to try and meet that equity requirement. And then there are the kind of struggles you've had in discussions around athletic fees and how do we take these different things and try and do something that's fair. I think with respect to some of these organizations, if you increase the costs in those organizations, there will be some people who will miss opportunities. It's just that simple. So I strongly encourage you to look at the totality of what this impact is. Look at that number and see how you feel about that and how material it is to the operations of the district before you make any decision. And then, of course, I wanted to leave you with one inconvenient truth. The Boardwalk campus was designed as a net zero building.
Hello, Gary.
Good evening. Gary Kushner, Boxborough Finance Committee. I'm not here representing the Finance Committee right now. This is the first I heard about this coming up when Raphael told me, who's a member of the Boy Scouts in Boxborough, and I'm only speaking Boxborough right now. When we sold Blanchard to the region as part of the regional agreement, there was an MOU, that we could utilize the facilities. Money, I'm sure, was not discussed in there. But Blanchard is a town facility, a town usage. And to take away, to kick the Scouts out and whatever the other groups that are in there that you're kicking out, I don't think is the right thing to do for the town of Boxborough. I think you're really going to hurt the town. And I think that you'll have a lot of town people in Boxborough who supports the school system, who have kids in Scouts, who have kids in sporting events, impact them a lot. And again, they support the school system. We're paying, 15% of the budget or whatever it is right now. I don't have my paper in front of me. But please think about the towns and the people in the town that you're impacting by unfortunately kicking the Scouts out, kicking sports teams out that don't have the funds to cover that. I understand it's expensive, but the members of the two towns are paying for the school system. They're paying these bills. And they have kids who, not just in the school, but are utilizing the schools after hours. So please think about that. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi,
I'm Catherine Hatfield. I live at 30 Mohawk Drive. And right now, I'm president of Acton Group of Citizens. Boy Scout Troop 1 has been sponsored by a group of citizens for over 110 years in this town. And in the past couple of years, we picked up responsibility to sponsor Troop 32 and Troop 12. If you're worrying about equity, part of equity, I think, is diversity. My son was an Eagle Scout in Troop 1 in 2008, and I'm still involved mentoring Eagle Scouts, and I lead a group to try to provide support and backup for the Scoutmasters and the committee chair people. And I go to the meetings periodically, and I have never seen a more diverse group of boys working together, doing things. An integral part of each, somebody talked about a cultural night or day at the high school recently. In the month of either November or December or January, each of the troops has a cultural night where they bring things in about their countries to share with the other people. And it's really, really nice to be able to see these kids in a room, in a space that's big enough for them to work in. And to hear about the impact that this budget increase would have is really difficult for some of the families. The council dues, the national dues, and the troop dues mount up. And if there's more than one boy in a troop, it's a lot of money. I mean, I'm speaking, I think it's about $250, plus in a week of summer camp. It's not a bargain. Back in the day, it was $275. It's up to $495 now. So I know that everybody's bearing and trying to keep up with the cost increases. But the boy who sat at the table, the young man who sat at the table earlier tonight and gave his presentation about his project was an Eagle Scout from Troop 32. So many of the boys I have seen who aren't the sports boys, who may be in band while they're doing scouts as well, are in the Boy Scout troops. And they're learning how to work with one another and they're learning about leadership and about different skills. And to have a space like this to be able to work in is so important for them. And believe me, there isn't a lot of extra space in town to do that, all right? The church halls are limited. And the complications of trying to find space in a corporate location is just too difficult with the core requirements that we have. So I ask you to consider some of this, because when I heard about the proposed amount to rent the space, it's more than the annual budget of each of the troops.
It is, it's true.
And they do fundraising. Troop 32 and 12 sell Christmas wreaths. They earn a lot of money, the boys out in the streets doing this. And you need the money for the trips. I mean, they pay for an amount for each of the trips, but
I think we've
the
gotten
troop,
the point, ma'am. I hear you.
Okay.
We gotta,
all right,
I'm
I
trying
could
to keep
go
us
on,
here.
and I
Yeah,
just
it's
wanted to
9:20.
put that up because it's really important. Thank you.
So I'm gonna, Ben, can you keep it to 30 seconds or less? Can you keep it to 30 seconds or less? Thank you.
No, I'm good.
No, I'm talking to Ben.
Aaron, quick question. Can you tell me approximately how many troops scheduled through you to do community service projects on the school property to do any sort of maintenance or capital improvements?
I can only maybe recall one. That hasn't been, they aren't going through me if they're doing things. They may well be doing them, but they're not scheduling through community ed.
I'd like to know if there's any sort of work being done on school property to which they are doing any sort of capital maintenance or capital projects.
No, not that I know of, but maybe facilities would know better.
Yes. No, the facilities manager is the sponsor for any projects done on school property. The outdoor classroom was mostly assembled by Scout Eagle projects here outside this building. There was work done at Gates. There had been work done at Conant, and that's just in the past 5 years. More Scouts, I admit, work for conservation, but there are projects going here.
Thank you.
25 seconds, I promise. Can we quantify that amount, or can your groups quantify how much was spent in terms of, you know, a donation in time and equity? That's my last.
So, yeah, Jenny.
I just want to clarify, just because this has been said a few times, nobody is kicking anybody out of anywhere. We are re-examining our facilities policy and asking, you know, for a first read tonight and, you know, ultimately a vote. And, you know, should it be the case that this committee feels that, you know, any group should enjoy most favored status, that's obviously within this committee's, you know, power and purview. Just, you know, I just want to say that. But what Aaron and with the administration is coming to us and looking for is a policy that can be pointed to, so that when other groups ask why them and not us, you know, we have an actual policy to refer people to. So
No,
so
I get
that's
that.
all.
So I don't think that anybody, I think we understand that nobody's getting kicked out, right? But I think that what we are hearing from the community is that the fees that have been proposed would be almost as if kicking them out, because it would be unaffordable. So what I'm hearing in the language, and I get it, I'm biased here. I'm married an Eagle Scout. I've got 2 kids in 284. You know, I've been trying to keep my mouth shut. But I also run a nonprofit, and so I understand about limited budgets, right? So when you say I have increasing costs and therefore I have to pass them on to you, nonprofits say, oh my God, I have limited resources, so what am I supposed to do now? And the church halls are limited. As a matter of fact, Cub Scout Troop 32 was kicked out of their church because churches don't do this anymore. So if you can't be in a place and you can't afford a place, where do we do the thing? So I would like for a second read before I voted on this policy, for there to be more about either a slow ramp up, or I don't think that it's special status. I'm not sure that I like that language. I think that there should be some sort of consideration for organizations that do the things that Scouts do. And I didn't get it before I married an Eagle Scout, but now I really get it, and I'm part of this community. I get that I'm biased. I'll even abstain from the vote. But I want to see something more, because I think that there are some organizations that do for the community and could have a partnership with the community, I mean, with the schools, to have access to these facilities in a way that's affordable. I think that we can do that. I would like to see that happen before I voted on this.
Mine's 10 seconds.
10 seconds, and then, okay, so Amy and then Adam, and then we're gonna move forward.
I completely agree with Kyra. I really think that I'd like to hear some alternative plans for classifications for groups that, yeah, I agree with Kyra.
So hearing all of this, you know, I think what we've provided is a price list that provides equality and not equity. Everyone is treated equal. And the reality is there are some nonprofit organizations in town who have a larger financial base, who run a larger operation, who can absorb these fees. There are some nonprofit organizations in town who can't. And so my request, aligned with everybody else, is it's got to be a far more complicated fee structure than Class 1, 2, and 3. I think we need to break the Class 2 fee structure out and identify different types of organizations, not by who they are, but by their financials somehow, something like that, that allows those organizations that have a smaller financial base. The flip side of that is every dollar we're unable to collect through community ed usage fees is dollars that don't go to teaching our kids and having teachers in classrooms. That, to me, is the bottom line. So we have to consider that as well.
I'm sure you will find the balance, and we look forward to it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Aaron, for staying late. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming and talking on that one. All right, here we go. Consent agenda, right? We're good? Yes. All right, here we go. Items on the consent agenda do not usually require discussion and are approved with one vote unless any member would like to hold an item for discussion and a separate vote. I will read each item name, and if any member would like it held, please say hold. Members do not have to have attended the meeting to vote on minutes. Number 1, a recommendation to approve Miriam PTSO $7,300 donation to Miriam educators to purchase diverse and culturally responsive books. Item number 2, recommendation to approve $25,000 check for the 13th installment from Dragonfly Theater to Acton-Boxborough Regional School District. There are no minutes because it's crossed out on my part. We don't have minutes, right? We're not voting on minutes this time? I don't think we have minutes. Yeah, next meeting. No minutes. It's crossed out on mine. That's what happened.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Okay, so that was Adam, and I think I heard Tessa. I'm putting it over there. It was Tessa. I know, I'm sorry. Here we go. All those in favor? Aye. Any non-approval, abstentions? Opposed, thank you. Whatever. I'm a writer. I get to use non-approval. All right. We're all set. Very good. Statement of warrants. Who's got them?
I do. I move that the school committee vote to approve the below-listed warrants totaling $8,313,254.26. AP vendor warrant as follows: 23-018 dated 3/2/2023 in the amount of $745,636.89. Payroll vendor warrants as follows: 23-017 PR dated 2/23/2023 in the amount of $1,217,896.31. 23-018 PR dated 3/9/2023 in the amount of $544,376.80. Payroll warrant as follows: P2317 dated 2/23/2023 in the amount of $3,042,546.65. P2318 dated 3/9/2023 in the amount of $2,742,947.36. Student activity warrants as follows: 23-018 BL dated 3/9/2023 in the amount of $781. 23-018 JH dated 3/9/2023 in the amount of $19,069.25.
Amy got it this time. So that was Adam, and Amy seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions. Very good. That went unanimously. Peter, is there anything that you would like to highlight in the FYI?
Sure. There in the FYI, and I need to get to the right tab here with that, there is, just of note, a bill to increase the state share of the foundation budget. I believe that was proposed by Senator Lewis. I just had a conversation with Senator Eldridge the other day to also advocate for that. So he's looking at that. That would have a significant impact to Acton-Boxborough. But I would also just note, and I think last meeting I shared that Kyra and I went to a legislative breakfast to talk about, all of the challenges that districts in this whole part of the state are having. They're all very similar to what we're experiencing. Representative Cataldo was also there, so he got to hear that information. I did follow it up with Senator Eldridge yesterday on the same, but there were really, some specific things that the Superintendent's Association is advocating that legislatures move on. And so one is a bill to mitigate the 14% increase for private special education programs that was approved by OSD. By creating like a one-time pothole account. That's very doable. There are both House and Senate bills for that, and we certainly want to make sure that, our legislators have the information to support that. Similarly, there's Senate Bill 1786 and House 3170, which lower the circuit breaker cost threshold. Those are also items that the Superintendent's Association would support as well. There's SD 1783 and HD 3156, which increases the circuit breaker reimbursement from 75 to 90%. Those are floating out there. And then there's also two bills, 1421 in the Senate and 3102 in the House, that are calling for a comprehensive review of fiscal sustainability of special education service delivery in Massachusetts, to really just have the state take a pause and look at how we're funding the costs that we all know we need to be providing for our students. I would just encourage people to, do whatever you can to advocate that legislators sign on to those bills, and we keep motion going, because those would all have direct benefit back to us. Dave, I think, is excited about this topic too.
Just to throw one more thing onto the last one, the study of special education costs. So back in 2015, when the Foundation Budget Review Commission released its report, we had an appendix that said, while we don't have time to look into this, the foundation budget underfunds in-district special ed costs by, it was about $1 billion. That was fiscal 2015. I'd argue that that number has grown since then. This would be a welcome thing to look meaningfully at, underfunding of special ed costs, because districts like ours have increased in-district programs and saved out-of-district costs. Well, okay, that's good. So what do you want, district? Well, what happens is the state saves circuit breaker money when they don't have to reimburse us for high-cost tuitions, because we've served those kids in district with our own resources. So that would be a very encouraging step. And serve all districts, not just one category socioeconomically.
Big thanks again to Representative Cataldo, who made the time to come to that legislative breakfast. I'm glad that Senator Eldridge did some follow-up.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
That was Tessa, and it was Amy, and all those in favor. Aye. There is no meeting on the 30th. You're welcome. See you in April.